Hello. Hey, hi guys. This is Prateek, a mentor with the Udacity for Business Analyst Nano Degree, and I welcome you all to this webinar on SQL commands, aggregator functions in SQL. So this is the second webinar on SQL for this particular nano degree. Um, in the first webinar, we talked about basic select commands in SQL. And in this webinar, we are going to talk about aggregator functions in SQL. And then, we'll be practicing few questions based on those functions so that we are pretty clear about the functions, aggregator functions in SQL. So let me quickly tell you the agenda for this webinar. So it's not going to be a very long webinar. I'll be just, telling you basic definition about the SQL aggregator commands which are there, and then we'll be looking at having and where clauses in SQL, and when which clause is supposed to be used, and then I'll be solving around 4 to 5 questions which will be having SQL aggregator functions, and then I'll have Q&A session. So if you guys have any queries, if you guys have any doubt, you can ask me in the Q&A session. Um, so talking about aggregate function, aggregator function. So an aggregate function basically in SQL allows you to perform a calculation on a set of values to return a single scalar value. And we often use aggregate functions with group by and having clauses of the select statement. So there are 5 aggregator functions in SQL: the average function, count function, minimum function, maximum function, and sum function. So these functions are self-explanatory, but still I'll tell you about define all these functions. So basically, average function is used to calculate the average of a set of values. Maybe you have a column which contains say 100 rows, so you want to know the average of all the values in that particular column, so you can use average function in that case. Count is again, you can similarly count the number of values which are there in different columns or different rows. You can use count function for that. Minimum and maximum function is basically to find out the minimum value and the maximum value, in a column or in set of columns. And sum is again basically used to calculate the sum of a of a row or a column. So in the last the webinar I had, in which we talked about basic select queries, I discussed about where clause which is there. So basically, where clause is used for filtering out the records from a result, and there is another clause called having clause, which is added to SQL because where keyword could not be used with aggregate functions. So basically, maybe you want to write a query and you want to find out only those you want to find out the maybe you want to find out the name of those student in the classroom whose sum of 5 subjects is greater than say 400 out of 500 total value. So if you want to write a query something like this, you can, if if you're using having clause instead of where clause, you can directly write sum of all the subjects which are there, and then you can give the condition that it should be greater than 400 or whatever condition you have. So that is the advantage of the having function, the having clause instead of where clause. um, Another difference is having clause is used to filter values from a group, and having is used to filter values after they have been grouped, and only columns or expression in the group can be included in the having clause condition. So you can look at the example which I have shown at the bottom of the slide. Here you can see that we are creating a new column known as total price. So if you want to create a new column, maybe a calculated column from set of columns you already have, what you can do is you can just uh, give an alias name to that particular new calculated value. So here we have taken the sum of unit price multiplied by order quantity, and then we have taken the sum of that, and we have defined that particular column or the new calculated column as total price. Now we also want to apply a filter to this, and the filter is that it should be greater than 10,000. So for that, we are using having function here. So first we'll group by that particular um, column, and then we'll use having function to apply the filter we want with the aggregator function. So yeah, so we don't really have a lot of theory for talking about having and where clauses, and for SQL aggregator functions. So we'll just move on to the fun part, which is practicing SQL on hacker rank. So I'll be solving few set of questions, and it will basically solve it will cover almost all the functions, aggregator functions, which are there in um, SQL. So I have a set of 5 questions here, and we'll be solving these 5 questions. Let's start with the first question. So okay, let me just remove the solution. Yeah. So if you look at this question, it says that we have been given a table, city, which contains 5 different columns. And the name of the columns are ID, name, country code, district, and population. And the problem statement here is query a count of number of cities in city, in the table city, having a population larger than 100,000. Okay, so we have. Okay, so we have to use the count aggregator function here. As you can see, we have the problem statement says that we have to count the number of cities which are there in our city table, which have the population larger than 100,000. So let's start with select count of maybe name from the name of the table, which is city. And then there is a condition. The condition is the population should be larger than 100,000. So we'll apply the filter, the condition, which is where population is larger than 100,000. Let me now just run the code. And yes, our solution is correct. Now it says that there are 6 cities. There are 6 different cities, which who have population more than 100,000. So this is basically how you use count function. The count function can be used in the select statement while you're writing the select statement, or it can be used in the having clause while you're applying the filter. So let's move on to the second question. And this, look at the, okay, this is the, we have to use the sum function in this particular question. So if we look at the problem statement, it says that query the total population of all cities in city where district is California. All right. So we have to find the sum of the population here. So let us just start with select sum of, this is the function we want to use, and we have to find the sum of population column here, where district is California. So we have a condition, and the condition is the district. Sorry, we have to first tell the table, and then we have to apply the condition. The condition is district should be equal to California. Okay, California. Now let me just run. So it says our solution is correct and the output is 339002. So the total population of California district is 339002 according to the database we have. So this is how you can use the sum aggregator function. We have already talked about the count function. Now let's look at the average function, the average aggregator function in SQL. So if we look at this particular problem statement, it says that query the average population of all cities in city where district is California. Average population. Okay, so in the last question, we found out the total population of all the cities which are in district California. In this, we have to find out the average population. All right, so let me just start this with select. Why don't we just have a look at number of cities which are there in district California? So we can use the count function here, which we used in the first problem we solved. Count, we need to count the name of the city from the table city where the condition is district should be California. So there are three. All right, there are three cities. And now we need to calculate the average for these cities, average population. So let me just make changes to the solution. Population from city where district is equal to California. If I run the query now, okay, there is some problem. Just see, all right, it should not be written like average, but average, AVG. This is how you use the function average in SQL. And yeah, the solution is correct, and the output is 113000. So the average population of cities in District California is 1100. Oh, sorry, 1,13,000. So that is how you use average function. Now let's move on to the next problem statement. Now, this problem statement is query the average population for all cities in city rounded to the nearest integer. Average population. Okay, so this question is very similar to the last question we solved. The only difference is we have to calculate the average for all the cities which are there, population, average population. So we don't really have to apply the filter in what we did in the last question, where it was supposed to be only for District California from city. And I guess that's it. Now, if I try to run the code, it says there is an error. My output is 45420.0361. Now, if we look at the question again, it query the average population for all the cities in city, rounded down to nearest integer. So the thing to catch here is rounded down to nearest integer. So there should not be any, it should not be an integer value. Instead, it is supposed to be a whole value, so whole number. So in that case, what we can do is there is another function called round in SQL, which we can use for rounding off the number. Now, this is how you can use a round function in the average of a population. You can take this value inside the round function, and then you can define, and after comma there are two parameters which round function takes in. So the first parameter is the value which we are passing, which is the average of the population of for all the cities. Second, parameter is the number of values you want after the point. So in our case, it is supposed to be 0. So what it will do is it will round it to the nearest integer. If we say 2, then it will give us after point 2 values, like maybe if our value is 40 point something something, then it will give us 40.31 or 40.21. If we say 3, then it will give us 40.215. But in our case it is supposed to be 0, so I'll just make it 0 and I'll run the code. And as you can see, it's the correct answer. And there are no values after the point. It is a whole number. So that is what our problem statement wanted us to do. So there are a lot of functions which are there in SQL, and um, I'll be sharing few materials. I'll be sharing few links, with you guys on Slack, like W3 School, which I have already shared. You guys can go through it, and you guys can see all the functions which are there, and you can practice it. Of course, HackerRank is a good place to practice and get used to all these functions which are there in SQL. Now let's move on to the last question which we are going to practice on SQL. Now, looking at the problem statement, it's the same table, there are same 5 fields. Now, looking at the problem statement here, it says that query the difference between the maximum and the minimum population in city. So basically, we need to find out the city with the maximum population, and then we need to find out the city with the minimum population, and we need to find the difference between them. So let's get started. Select. Now, if you want to find the maximum value, you can use the max function. So that's what I'm doing. I'm saying select the maximum of population. So what I'm saying is select the maximum value from the column or the field population, and select the minimum value from the same field population, and subtract these two values from from city. And now we'll just run the code again, and yeah, it's the correct answer. So if you look at the output is 4695354. So basically the difference between the city with the maximum population and the city with the minimum population is 4695354. So this is how basically you use maximum function and minimum function. So in this example, we covered maximum and minimum function which are there in aggregator functions in SQL. In this, we talked about average function, and we talked about extra function which is round function. And then in this particular example, we talked about the sum function and the count function. So these are the functions which which we use in SQL, aggregator functions. And yeah, so if you guys want to practice more questions, there are a lot of questions available on HackerRank, and I'll suggest you all to just go through these questions, practice these questions. It will help you. And if you want to maybe create your own database, or get a data download a data set from uh, you know uh, platforms like Kaggle and all, you can do that, and you can start practicing. You can come up with your own questions, looking at the database, and you can come up with insights um, from the data you have. So it will be really fun. I'll suggest you guys to do that. And if you really want me to make a webinar on how to create a database using a CSV file or something like that, I can do that as well. But once we are done with these must, or maybe uh, these important webinars, then I'll be making a webinar like that, and I'll be sharing with you guys. So now I'll take a pause for about 1 minute or 30 seconds, and if you guys have any questions, you can just ask me. And then yeah. Okay, so it seems like none of you have any doubt as of now. If you guys face any issue afterwards, you guys can reach out to me. You guys can ask me any question on Slack. You can DM me, and maybe get on a one-on-one call with me on Slack. So yeah, I just wanted to remind you all that you have this one-on-one call feature, and I want you all to utilize that feature. If there is something you're getting stuck with, and you think maybe it is not being solved on Slack, if I'm not able to explain that properly to you, you guys can, using my Calendly link, you guys can schedule a one-on-one session with me, and I'll surely help you resolve all the issues you have. So that's it for this particular webinar. I'll be making another webinar on um, SQL, in which we'll be talking about basic joins in SQL. So yeah, see you in that webinar, and all the best for your nano degree. Bye bye.